Without any further ado, I call upon the Prime Minister from Opening Government. The floor is yours. Here.
Okay, so before I start my speech, if you have any POI, you can just unmute your mic and say POI. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. All right, panels. We can see We can see that a parent has a great influence on a children's life, especially in the early stages. Like the things that the parents told and the things that the parents give and teach to the children are the things that are essential and are the things that will be carried in the minds of the children for the rest of their lives. And we say as the opening government that because the role of the parents and the early life of the children is this essential, we say that it is very dangerous and very unethical for the parents to feed them religious indoctrinations like extremist teaching and so on and so on. So what we're going to prove as the opening government is we're going to prove on how and why the religious indoctrination is taking away the fundamental rights of the children. Okay, so on the mechanism and the model on how this suing will play out. Okay, so in our world, we want to have for the children to can sue their parents on how they're suing the parents is the children will come up to the court, and what will happen in the court is two things. Firstly, on the court there will be a background check the children will be the background of the children and the parents will be checked. There will be a check in their childhood dynamics on how to what extent is the religion have impact and how integrated is the religion in this children's early life. And secondly, on how the parents and child interaction about the matter of this religion. And secondly, in court, we will have a barrier to prevent any misuse of this suing mechanism. The children in the court has to prove and bring evidence to the judges on how and to what extent is the damage of these indoctrinations to the children's life is damaged. Okay, so in my arguments, I will talk about two things. Firstly, on the principality, on the principal level, on why indoctrination is fundamentally a criminal act, and secondly, on the practicality, on how the effect of this indoctrination is going to play out in the children's life from their early to adult stages. Okay, so to the first argument, on why indoctrination is a fundamentally criminal act. Okay, so what is happening when a parent is indoctrinating their child? When a parent is indoctrinating their child, they are teaching them severely extremist lessons, or lessons that are limiting the freedom, the rights to express themselves and their rights to access of informations. The parents in this indoctrination the parents in this indoctrination acts will be most likely restricting their access, the children's access to informations that are against the teaching of this religion, and are going to also preventing the children from expressing themselves in a manner that are against the religious teachings. But the problem with these restrictions is that because this is indoctrinated lessons, the lessons are more likely not in line with the religious teaching, but more restricting than normal religious teachings, right? So we say that when this restriction is more than normal than what a religious normal teaching is, we say that this will be severely limiting the children's expression and access to information. And this, when an action is limiting the rights of a person, we say that that action is already uncriminal offense. For example, like an analogy, for example, like if you kill someone, you are taking away their rights to live, right? So this is an act of taking away the rights of a person. So that is why we say that when indoctrination is taking away the rights of a child to express themselves and to have an access of information, we say that this in itself is principally a criminal act. Okay, to the second point on the practical level, on the practicality, on why and what is the effect of this indoctrination to the children's life. Okay, so in the indoctrinated children's life, what is going to be most likely their characteristic of the children when they are indoctrinated are they are most likely to be more content with being obedient, right? They are more likely to be more obedient to whatever the parents are thinking, told to them, right? So we say that the effect of this indoctrination of the children is extremely harmful, right? Because we say that a freedom to express yourself in your early stages of life is what is going to shape you to an adult life. Right? If you are restricted to express yourself, we say that it is going to be so bad because it will be stunting the development of the children, right? Because the children will have no way to explore the world around them, and their point of view will be so restricted and so limited that it is going to be bad for them when they are already an adult. Why will this be bad for the children when they are already an adult? Because when they are already an adult and they have that limited viewpoints, we say that it is going to be hard for them to integrate themselves to the society, right? And this is a severely damaging factor for the children, like because integrating to the society is a prerequisite for them to gain, for example, a nice job, to earn money and to earn a living for themselves. So we say that this inability to integrate themselves with the society is going to harm the children's survivability because they are going to harder to find a job and to integrate themselves socially to the other person and for them to have a healthy relationship with other person because they are this indoctrinated. Because of the reason, proud to open the case for the proposition.
All right, thank you very much, Prime Minister. To respond to the case of the Prime Minister, I would like to call upon the Leader of Opposition. Leader of Opposition, floor is yours. Here.
Check. Okay, I'm going to set up my timer first. Hold on. Shit. Okay, if I'm already audible, I'm going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. First of all, I think that team opposition in this case will distinguish what is abuse and also indoctrination. If the concern of the team government is talking about all the damages given for both mentally and also physically, then it should be categorized as an abuse to begin with and not indoctrination. What it means of indoctrination is not that particularly extreme as what team government have exercised in today's debate. Indoctrination can do things like provide and send your children into religious school, going to have a religious studies and going together in mosque and church together as a form of instilling the values towards your children on what kind of moral behavior that what you should do and what you shouldn't do to begin with, right? Secondly, a clarification is that team government have never provided an alternative on what parenting style will look like in their side of the house. Do they want their children to open in all knowledge, or even parents should be providing all knowledge when to begin with? It should be clear on their side of the house what kind of parenting style they wanted to instill to begin with. Therefore, a setup in our case, one, we think that in our side of of the house, we would not try to we would not provide the right to sue towards the children that has become the victim of indoctrination from their parents, because we will recognize that indoctrination as two things. A, it is a form of children and parents relation. It's a means to create a form of relation in between parent and children. And number two, we think that children need a moral compass to build a great behavior to begin with that should be exclusively delivered by indoctrination, right? Beforehand, one points of rebuttals, and then later on, the other one will be integrated into my speech. Team governance side of the house believes that it is principally, indoctrination is principally a crime because you take away someone's rights to begin with, right? Number one, if that is particularly true, that way of thinking, that there should be a liberty in all sense of your behavior in your life. Life always has, to some extent, a particular limitation, even if it is fundamental to begin with. If that is true, that it will limit your points of information, then I think that governance side of the house need to also ban things like nationalism or teaching civic in the school, because it limits your perspective upon your nation states to begin with, right? There should be a more question and more elaboration on why then it should be a crime. But number two, we think that the limitation for children is in and of itself necessary, because knowing that their characterization is that they cannot digest a vast and also various information to begin with, then we need this indoctrination to instill value as a form of moral behavior teaching to them. Later on will be elaborated in my speech. I have 2 points to prove to you. Let's go to point number one. Point number one, I'm going to talk, irrespective of damages, parents should not be held culpable for indoctrination, right? There are several key aspects. One, we think that we should know the characterization of parents who are doing indoctrination. They are most to begin with are the fundamentalists. They are most to begin with were indoctrinated too from their grandparents or even their parents to begin with, ladies and gentlemen, right? Those particular family who send you to religious school or even taught you to wake up at subuh and go to masjid together are those who are most likely consume the religious media, are those who are most likely consume the teaching from their grandparents, for example, upon what kind of vision and mission that you should do with their lineage, ladies and gentlemen, right? At this particular point, it sounds that these particular parents who are doing indoctrination were part of an externalities, something they are not principally culpable to begin with, right? Because the moment that you need to prove is that there should be another alternative beside of those indoctrinated parents to begin with. Well, indoctrinated parents do not have any particular alternative in their life, since they are living in a constraint of religious families, since they are living in a kampung in whereabout they have the homogeneous identity that they do not being exposed with another values to begin with, making them culpable. Prove to you that they should have a responsibility to open up their mind. Well, technically, ladies and gentlemen, those parents still have a limited capacity of things like information or even the consumption of media they wanted to expose to, because you need to open yourself to the world. It should be a privilege to a certain extent of people who cannot do that at this very moment. So we think that on the principle of culpability, we win this debate. Second points of argumentation, I'm going to talk about why then indoctrination of children is permissible in
Rafli, before second.
No, thank you. Number one, why indoctrination is permissible is that it is the way or even a means for parents to connect with their children. Because currently, ladies and gentlemen, it is important for parents and children to know one and another. In a key respects, there is having an activity and also bonding together to know what kind of characteristics and also the form of behavior of your children and so on and so forth. Technically, in status quo, the reason as to why we send our children to Islamic school or even asking them to go to church together were just a pragmatic bonding between father and son or even mother and daughter, for example. Because technically, just a pragmatic reason, for instances, like going to church and also going into recital together were practically a cheaper alternative, because there is a communal basis in terms of, like religious agenda or even religious activities together, that you need to do it with your children to begin with, right? But even if those particular example is not enough, the second reason as to why indoctrination is permissible for parents is that it's the way how to teach morality towards the children and shape children behavior to begin with. Why this is point of important and like me? We think that religious studies is something that decide on what kind of behavior that you need to do and what you shouldn't do. For instances, like how like in Christianity there is 10 commandments of God, do not to steal, or even love your neighbor, and so on and so forth. Right? This particular thing is pretty much effective since children need a figure. For example, like inside of religion, we taught to you about saint, we talk to you about Rasul, we talk to you about prophet, and so on and so forth, for the children to take example out of that. But what happened the moment when indoctrination is banned to begin with? There are two comparative I wanted to prove. One, we think that when you teach children the multiple points of views of religion, there will be a confusion upon what kind of figure that they should follow. Because although religious provide the same guidelines, like not to kill everyone, but the way how they interpret the story of religious figure are pretty much different. For example, when you talk about the story of Jesus Christ in Christianity and also the story of Jesus Christ in Islam, there should be a differences of characteristic to begin with, and this confusion stem towards children upon disbelief on what kind of particular behavior that what Jesus Christ should do to begin with. There'll be a question on whether this is a legit person or even legit teaching at the end of the day. So we think that instillment of values cannot be happen to begin with. And why this is important, it's because children have a limited capacity to digest the diverse information to begin with. But last but not least, the other comparative of things like civic and also other morality is not necessarily particularly effective, since what is exclusive from religion is that there is an absolutism of God who foresaw you and also will guide you through behavior shaping of the children. Thank you, and we're back to Opus.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. I agree with leader of opposition. We are not talking about physical abuse. We are not talking about extreme cases of abuse. But we are also not talking about simply you being taught that you have to ngaji by your parents. We also don't talk about like you simply being taught that the 10 commandments is right by your parents, right? Because that is not what the indoctrination is, and we are okay if you want to teach your children about religious value. We are very okay with that. What we are not okay with is that you are dismissing any question, any critics that your children might have of your religion, taking away your children's freedom of expression, and you are taking away their right, that you are being forceful, inflicting some forms of punishment over one or another, right? That you any critics to your religion is wrong and any other teaching is wrong. We think that this is what indoctrination is, and this is a direct violation of the children's right of expression and also the children's right to live securely. I'll talk about that later in my argument. But let's first do one independent rebuttal, because roughly says that these parents are not intentional. They were also being indoctrinated. Number one, we say no, because these are adults' parents. We say that there is a very different degree of like complacency when you are already an adult, but you are still being indoctrinated and you are still being like conflicted by this, right? Or even inflicting the same pain that you go through towards another person. Because we are talking about secular society here. We're not talking about Saudi Arabia or Iran, that perhaps these people doesn't have any other alternative. But the motion should also not talk there, because exactly those are incredibly religious society where these laws is impossible to begin with. Religious indoctrination is the norm right there. So if you're talking about most secular societies like Indonesia, for example, you already have a lot of access. You have the internet. You have a lot of other religions, like religious people actually living in one neighborhood or whatsoever, right? But therefore, you also have the intention and you also have the direct complacency to begin with. But number two, we see that in most instances of crime, intention is not really that important. For example, if you actually kill someone without the intention of killing them, you are still liable towards the harm that you inflicted towards them. This is called manslaughter, right? That is to say, if you do drunk driving and you don't actually have the intention to kill anyone by driving, you still are liable towards your neglect, right? That is to say, the case of intention is not really the most important case here. So I'm going to talk about why indoctrination is actively taking away the rights of the children, because there is two incredibly important aspects and characteristics of indoctrination that we have not mentioned. never talk about. Number one is the unilateral aspects that these parents decides and dismiss all the possible thought of the children. That is to say, the children might have already said that I don't want to do this, I don't want to learn this, and this is something that is not like acceptable towards me, but the parents actively dismiss it by their own situation and by their own like rational thought without any considerations towards the children. But number two, it's mostly forceful. And yes, we're not talking about forceful about how you are getting like punched or you are getting like abused, right? But these are, you are being inflicted some form of punishment when you don't actually follow your parents. What are this? That if you question whether I should go to Salat or not, I don't get uang jajan, for example, or I don't actually like have food or whatsoever. These parents have the power to do that, and they guilt trip you every single time. That if you question Allah and you are going to hell, that you are going to be a very terrible person, you're have a lot of kesialan in your life, right? These are exactly the kinds of harms and the kinds of forcefulness that these parents are inflicting in indoctrination. That is to say, these parents use their power to take away the fundamental right that every human should have to live securely without this kind of guilt tripping and without this kind of like forceful implications of the one beliefs towards another, and to actually express themselves, to have thought of their own. These are human beings, not cattle with back to river, right? That is to say, the harms of indoctrination is also incredibly big and incredibly tangible. Number one, the psychological damage. Most people that has been indoctrinated has a psychological trauma even when they are adults, right? That is to say, all the guilt tripping are not easy to actually go away. For example, if you're talking about LGBT individuals that has been indoctrinated that they are living the wrong way, that they always live with the shame and the internalized homophobia about themselves. Like they can never actually see that they are a person that actually deserving of love. Number two, the opportunity cost, that even if you can actually go away from this trauma and this psychological cost, this you already have a lot of opportunity being thrown away just because you are being indoctrinated. For example, the friends that your parents said you should not be friend with just because they are not Islam or not Christian, right? Or actually the jobs that you cannot take because exactly you are not actually equipped enough with the information because your parents say that science is stupid, right? That all these harms can be provable in a court, and it's also something that is possible for you to actually have evidence with. And this is incredibly tangible harm that your life is getting ruined because of the indoctrination, the unilateral indoctrination that your parents did just because they want to, just because they think that this is the best for the children. But number two, we think that the principle of crime is not always on a personal level. No, we also have to talk about a societal level, right? That is to say that not on that something can be considered crime not only because you inflict harm or this is a bad in personal level, but it's also how the government dictates what kind of society they want to have, right? For example, we ban the use of recreational drugs because it will harm the society in a really like societal level and in a big level. When these people do have the rights to actually use recreational drugs, right? That's to say we can actually limit something when we think that it is going to have a big harm towards the general society. So what is the harm of indoctrination? The harm of indoctrination is exactly you are teaching intolerance. Because when you dismiss any kind of critics towards your religion, that means that you are saying that your religion failure is the one true faith, that any other things are right. That the kind of behavior and the kind of actions that is being incited by the point of indoctrination is incredibly racist, is incredibly bigoted to begin with. Right? Without society does not want, the government should not actually like let this kind of behavior run amok and run apart. Government has the obligation to stop the cycle of radicalism, and in this case also to stop the cycle of religious indoctrination, where the people that has been constantly religiously indoctrinated are the person that exactly inflicts another harm toward other human being. With that, the government has also the responsibility to do that, and we are stopping that by proving that we are in giving the deterrence effect towards the parents we propose.
All right, thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. To close the opening debate,
Wait. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, first of all, I'm not really here about what the deputy prime minister said before because of my connection was bad before. So I would like to start my speech about what they are talking before, that they are saying that these parents took the limitations to their children. So because of that, they believe that these children can sue these parents because of those reasons. But first of all, I would like to take response to the uh, open government side of the house. They said that these parents took the limitations or the freedoms of their children, but with this kind of actions is not taking the freedoms of get the limitations to their children. We believe that those kind of acts is kind are acting of the responsibility to their parents to trying to protecting their children this in this world. Because of what? Because we believe that this world is full of informations, and and all of those informations is not all good things, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe that those parents have a responsibility to filtering those kind of informations before they are get they are send them to their children. Because of those reasons, we believe it is not a limitations. And now jumps to my arguments that why the children need these indoctrinations and it is justified, ladies and gentlemen. First, we need to understand about what happened in this world. Like I said before, this world is full of information that maybe it is not proper with our children. And second, we need to understand about the children characterizations first, ladies and gentlemen. The children characterizations is first, they cannot differentiating the good things and are the bad things. Second, they just following people's. And third, they still searching about what's that called, jati diri and so on and so forth. So this is the this is the role of parents. As parents, they have the responsibility to protecting their children. So they have a responsibility first to teach their children and to protecting the bad things from their children. What happened on this? We need the role of parents model. So we accepted this kind of indoctrination in order to filter the bad things that happen for the children, of the characterizations of the children that they will following anything. So this parents need to do that to in order to create their children in a good way and so on and so forth. This indoctrination helps
Is she lost?
in they will took the wrong decision. Their strict parent will protect them and telling the truth or teaching them about the good, ladies and gentlemen. And second, when they become adult or teen the day, indoctrinations, we believe that when their children teaching with sexually or when they're still child, they will have a foundation. They will know about the good things, and if they know about the bad things, they will know it before but before the bad things happens to them. Compared to the opening governments, when they do not uh, take this indoctrination for the students because they believe that it only limiting them, their children will be confusing. Their children will be not fed, and they will cannot differentiate before the good things and the bad things. So, if the worst case is the children will become the bad persons in the end of the days. But compared to our side, we believe that by using this indoctrination, when they become adult, they will have good foundations and they will continuously their life and choosing the good way because of their beliefs in their religion, for example, and so on and so forth. And they believe that their parents is have a good intentions to do those kind of indoctrinations. second argument is why we cannot show these parents, because in the end of the day, even if it is hard or harming the children's, because first reasons is we have to differentiating our uh, between the teachings and also the what's that abusing and so on and so forth. We need to understand about how the parameter of showing itself. The parameter of showing itself comes that if the parents have the evil intentions to harm their children. So what is the evil intention itself? Evil intention itself is when the parents have intentions to harming or to what's that menyakiti their children in order to pursuing their goals in the end of the day. But what we see in this kind of characterizations is these parents only want the good way and the good things for their children. So we believe that this parent has no one of evil intention. That the parents have is only a good intentions. So we believe that it is not appropriate to show their parents, even to show their parents because of those kind of reasons. We beg to oppose. Um,
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader of Opposition. To open the closing debate, I would like to call the member of the government. Member of the government, floor is yours. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Wait, I'm going to set my paper. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, we do concede that parents is the biggest influencer for the children itself. But the thing is that the question is, what is the ideal parents looks like in our world, right? The adult parent means that this parent should give education that is positive to the children. Moreover, about the religious itself, because talking about Sarah, it's literally sensitive towards the children, that we cannot actually neglect any kinds of critical thinking of the children itself. We cannot ban all of the reasons to the children, because banning the reason to the children means we are not going to have in means we're not going to have our children becoming a critical thinking person. We think that is going to actually affect towards the bad growth of the children itself, right? Adult parents should give the religious value that is good to the children. Means that these parents could not teaching about being radical person, like being radical person, right? They need to still to give them a critical reasons and why they need to choose religious A or choose religious B with the very critical reasons, and not mocking other religious, ladies and gentlemen. The judges do not believe in roughly characterizations about indoctrinations, that actually indoctrination means you put your children to this religious goal. Because the thing is that when it only when the circumstances only like that, we think that there wouldn't be a harmful, there wouldn't be a bad impact that children feels, and it means to you these children wouldn't sue their parents if they do not feel a very bad, a very hard, a very abusive and mental abusive towards the children. That is why in this debate we are talking about the abusive thing that parents give to the children. That is why these children could not hold any kinds of could not hold hold it anymore, and that is why they are going to choose sue to their parents, ladies and gentlemen. That is why in closing government, we are going to preview three mechanisms. First of all, our first mechanism, we are going to provide rehabilitation for the child for the parents that is actually radical, like in Denmark, for example, so that they are going to be healed by having this kind of rehabilitations. But also talking about the children, we are going to give the children protection. For example, like for example, we are going to give them protection so that they're not going to feel that trauma alone, because we are going to provide them psychologists, for example, to actually heal them, to have them heal. But the last but not least, that we are going to provide them a lawyer, so that there will be no reasons about the capital that whether or not these children it is accessible to have this to sue the parents, because we are going to provide them the lawyer to sue their parents, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we are in this debate. We are talking about indoctrination that attack the mental issues to the children, that the status quo right now, there is no kind of law to protect these children with mental abusive, like this religion itself to these children. That is why two things I'm going to talk in my speech. Number one, why this is the same case as domestic violence, that domestic violence has already the law itself, ladies and gentlemen. But the second is that it's going to lead to the justifications why actually parents could be criminalized to the court under two parameters that I'm going to talk in my speech later. First of all, why this is the same case as domestic violence? Why? Because indoctrinating your child means you are suspending the reason. The reason and thinking are the future adults' means of survival and coping problem, ladies and gentlemen. By impeding rational capacities to your child, it means that you are going to sacrifice part of growth of your children, ladies and gentlemen. Because it's true that the children are not as wise as an adult itself, but it doesn't mean you do not teach children to think and reasons. If Karafli are talking to you about the connection between your parents and the children, we think that the connections are going to also happen in our side of the house when you also have discussion towards your children. Why it should be this religious, why it should be that religious, ladies and gentlemen. We think that connections between the parents and also the children is not necessarily means that you need to actually limit their choices to choose a religious, ladies and gentlemen. Instead, we think that the connections is not going to be happen in their side of the house. Why? Because how can it's going to be called as connections if you are only putting your child into the religious school? You are not going to meet them. You are not going to see them in your house. You are going to actually them to another school, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we think that connection is going to be very, very far, because you are having a long distance relationship with your children, ladies and gentlemen. Even if it's true that the connection is there, we think that it's not going to be a meaningful connection to your children. Because why? Because what you are going to do is that you are always dictating your children, like you need to be Muslim, because if you go to the Christians, you are going to be kafir, for example. You are going to be put in the hell by God if you are choosing this religion. We think that connection would not that meaningful in their side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. But second, if Karafi taught you about if we give them a multiple information about religions, it's going to be confusion. The children are going to be confused about. But we think that what we say exactly, confusion are going to be happen in your side of the house is going to be worse. Why? Because the children are always wondering, why should I do this? Why should I do that? I never get my answer to my parents. My parents are only dictating me to be in this, to be in that. Because of what? Because the parents are because the parents are going to use in the name of religion, like if you go with that, you are going to be put in hell, essentially. That's why two parameters why it's justified to criminalize the parents. Because number one, because when they reap the benefits, because when they reap the rights of the children itself. Why? Because because they could actually actually tell to the children because they could doing an abusive and assault physic to the children under some circumstances in the name of religion. That is why we think that it's justified to show the parents by our mechanism itself, and it's going to be accessible to every single child to show their parents. We are very proud to open the case by closing government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, member of the government. To respond to the case of the member of the government, I call upon the member of opposition. Floor is yours. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1. Both sides will fail because their analysis on what will happen after you allow children to sue is literally zero. I think opening up also fails in this debate because I think their analysis on the why it's going to be important to not allow for children to be allowed to sue is because you have better relations, because you can still go to church with each other. CEO will be the first thing that will analyze to you what will happen after. This will harm the dynamic of the individuals, how they interact with their parents, and this will also allow the community to become even more conservative because the future way for them to get out from them to be able to be suing, but they will be more isolationist in the process because they don't want to be in that process of being legally prosecuted. I will argue two things in this speech. Number one, principle. Secondly, what will happen after. All of the rebuttals will be integrated. Number one, principle. So I think I can just literally conclude the government case on this principle is it's coercive towards the children, it's harmful, and you disallow for them to actually create some level of expression upon themselves. I will provide to you 4 reasons as to why religion have an incentive to not be this conservative. I think opening up literally missed this because they totally assume that we are only going to teach them in a way that we are going to churches, but no literal inherent incentive why they are going to be good. 4 reasons. Number one, because I think that religion have incentive to not indoctrinate that extremely because they have a reputation-based system. Because in the current status quo, especially in the context where there is a diversity of religions, they don't want to be seen as a religion that is actually hurting other people because the people that are actually not in the religion will criticize them even more. This example is Indonesia, when the radical Islam are actually trying to hurt other people, people who are religiously moderate, people who are actually outside of Islam, literally criticizes this kind of radical. That's why radical principles in the current status quo in Indonesia is not like totally overwhelmed in the whole states in the current status quo. But secondly, they also teach tolerance. It's one of the main interpretations that mostly religious moderate and most ulama also take upon. This is also used in Indonesia. But third of all, notice that especially in this context, they have an incentive to actually gain the voting and gain the followers of the religious moderates. You have to characterize that not all religious people are extreme, ladies and gentlemen. There is also an incentive for them to actually cater to religious moderates. That's how through time they change how they religiously indoctrinate people, not trying to harm their ability to express themselves, but trying to teach them in religious values that can be interpreted in how they can directly engage with other people that are outside of the religion, ladies and gentlemen. This incentive shows to you that the religion are not inherently evil, and they do not always have to teach this kinds of religious evil indoctrination in the process. I think government fails also because they automatically assume that every indoctrination are bad without analyzing the diversity of religion that exists in the current status quo. But secondly, even if we take all of this analysis that religion are evil, they're halting their ability to express themselves that good, I will be very charitable. This context exists. But notice, this is principally incoherent if you allow these children to vote. Why? Because notice that in the current status quo, even secular parents that inject values that are actually bad towards your children are not allowed, their children are not allowed to sue. Why this is important? Because your analysis is contingent upon you are teaching bad things towards your children. Why then secular parents that are injecting far-right radicalism into their children and injecting hating minorities are not allowed to actually sue towards your parents, gentlemen? I think this is problematic for 2 reasons. Number one, because you are unfair for these parents who are actually religious. But secondly, you allow for the law to actually skew certain communities that are actually having grievances, that are actually having specific kinds of identity that is especially important for them, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to be very generous also. Even if they want to dichotomize that the coercion level of religion is slightly higher than other values, Here's the problem. Even if that it's coercively slightly higher than other values, it's still going to be okay, because I think that the nature of what you are going to be teach in the process are not going to be automatically evil and not going to automatically bad, given the systematic analysis as to why religion are right now going to more progressive things in the process, gentlemen. So I think in principle level, we totally win. No. Secondly, what will happen after? I have three analyses here. Number one, notice that when you are allowing children to sue their parents, what will happen is their parents are not going to automatically going to discuss with their children in the table and what do you want, my son? This is totally crazy logic, because using the analysis of team opening government and closing government, I think that their parent is going to be very conservative because they are halting their children to express themselves. Why this is important? Because they will show to you that these kinds of identity and these kinds of indoctrination in their parents are actually very deeply rooted already. So what will happen is the response of their parents are not going to provide them with discussion. They will be more conservative and they will be more controlling of their children, because they think that when I try to be more progressive, I will totally be a sinful person. I think this is a contradicting, by the way, because I take the characterization of opening government, closing government as to why these people won't change, thus showing to you that opening gov and closing gov totally give no inherent incentive why they can change. But secondly, notice that we have to characterize what kind of children that are going to sue toward their parents. I think it's not going to be children that are automatically very progressive and they are people that are automatically just become aware. We have to characterize that most of these children that are going to do this are given opportunities by their conservative parents to actually maybe expose to other outside ideas in the process, such as they give them more internet or give them go to public school. Why this is important? Because the moment that you do this policy, other parents will see that if they try to make their teaching become more progressive, they will be sued by their children. The problem with this is their ability to expose them to more moderate values in the process will be much harder, because they think that they don't want to be sued by the children in the process. So what will happen is they will be more extreme and more nationalist in the process, and they don't want to make their children to actually engage with other people in that process. This makes the narrative of radicalism even more radical and more rampant, because it shows to you also that people do not like religious indoctrination. They're showing the radical Islam also will respond in that way. But lastly, and most importantly, this will shift the discussion towards the individual, because what will happen is people will blame the parents as bad parenting, but not this is assuming that the problem is we want to deter down radical Islam and religious conservatism. This will make the discussion will be parents' failure rather than systematic problem that we need to take. But comparatively, we think that in the current status quo, the effort to actually create more progress already happens. As to why people are going to more public schools, they're given more internet and them giving more chances to actually integrate and engage with other people, because they want to have more religious moderates and gain more ability for their children to actually grow more. I think that CO is the only team that provides to you one principle, otherwise unfair to other parents, and secondly, what will happen after, which other team did not analyze very far to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, member of the opposition. To close the government bench, I would like to call the government whip.
Hi everyone, am I audible?
Yours. Here.
Okay, sure. Okay, so for the POI, I prefer you guys to unmute yourself because I wouldn't be able to check the chat box. Okay, I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. When a suicide family bombing happened in Surabaya back in 2018, 4 children died under the faint pursuit of the abstract that is religion. We realized that children should have a choice and a law that ensure their safety when their very existence is violated and put on the pedestal of scrutiny. Only in closing government did you value the right of children to protection. I cannot be prouder to close our case, right? So 3 questions then in this debate. First, is parents responsible? 2 answers. First, yes. I think there's a concession that parents do have an integral part in shaping the life of their children, right? Because being alive is literally not something children have a choice into. It was purely their parents' choice to have a child. Under this basic logic, the opposition's whole case about parents being irrational and possess like generational view of religious indoctrination is literally an argument against every attempt of children standing up for themselves, right? This also means that openly opposition justify the act of domestic violence with the sole reason that their parents was abused by their grandparents, right? This it means that under opposition's logic, they're going to justify any parents' wrongdoing just because the parents didn't know any better. I think that the idea that every single crime every single crime is like based on like irrational actions. I think that every single crime action is the byproduct of irrationality, but I think that opposition needs to defend why then this particular reason can absolve them for the consequences of the damage they inflicted, right? I think that literally just because crime happened because of them being irrational, this does not mean that any criminals are absolved from their ability to face consequences upon the damage they inflicted. They still undergo court proceedings and they still serve sentences in the end of the day. But second, even if we take them at their best and let's just like leap into the breach, right? Even if that's true, parents are irrational and they're incapable, right? I think that so when opening opposition spend like the first 4 minutes in their speech justifying why parents are irrational when they do indoctrination, the question then would be, if they are that irrational and if they are that incapable to act and think rationally, then why is it okay for us to sustain their parental rights, right? Because I think Sabam has already told to you that under our side, the proceedings that you will undergo, that children will undergo, literally the children are going to be taken away, taken away like in a custody and under the protection of Children Protection Commission, for example, and going to be split by their parents, right? So I think that literally when parents are putting up their children for adoption, when they cannot take care of them, when like literally children are put under protection when their parents are unable to be parents, we say that the very reason of incapability justify the state to literally step in and protect their children to begin with, right? So in the question that when parents are responsible, and we think that yes, they are responsible and they are culpable, but even if it is due to their irrationality and incapability, we say it is still justified under our side for the state to step in and protect their children to begin with, right? I think that closing government wins on this question. But second, I think we need to understand what are the parameters for us to like justify punishing someone's, right? I think this is something that Sabam has already attempted to argue, but I'm going to furthermore explain. We say that the parameter in which someone is justified to be like criminalized is fall under like 3 parameters. Firstly, because we say that it is the same reasons. I think that indoctrination is like on certain extent is like similar with domestic violence under 2 level, right? The first is that mental abuses. I think like OG has already talked about this when they talk about like constant restriction, but we also believe that they are going to be fear mongering about afterlife, for example, the constant scrutiny of like progressive ideas because you're going to be like conservative. We think that mental abuses happens when you eventually fearmonger your children into like opting into the religious belief that you want them to opt into, right? But second, on the terms of physical abuses, I think that like a lot of religions and a lot of religious citations actually enables physical abuses, in which that if you're applying indoctrination towards your children, you're also going to justify physical abuses towards some extents, because there are some exceptions in religious citations that allows you to punish your children physically, right? So I think that the fact that the indoctrination literally enables and have like the similar characteristic towards domestic violence, in which in the current status quo we already have like a court proceeding towards domestic law. We don't see why then we cannot give the right to the children to actually protect themselves against this kind of abuses, right? But second, we say that someone is justified to be criminalized when they reap the benefit of someone else suffering, right? Why is this the case? We think that indoctrination literally means parents reaping benefits of their children's sufferings, because the first they have the they reap like self-satisfaction when their children do what they want, right? They regain like self-satisfaction when their children do whatever they want and like have similar traits and characteristics with them. But second, we think that this religion indoctrination is also exclusive, because the religious notion that literally that if your children is not like ta'at, for example, you're also going to hell, right? So I think that parents have like another degree of like their own self-interest when they force their children into certain belief. I think that this in itself is immoral to begin with. Second is that we talk about negligence, right? We think negligence happen when you close the possibility of children going to enact into other religion, because I think that the objective notion that another religion is like good is not going to coexist with this indoctrination, because this means indoctrination means you're going to like literally demonizes other religions, right? So I think that negligence happens when you like intentionally close the possibility of your children gaining experience. I think this is very important because religion literally is going to be like very important in your life. But like thirdly, let's talk about the most important thing, and let's talk about the comparative under both sides, because I think like no team aside CG in this debate did any structural analysis on the children, right? Under what circumstances then will children sue their parents, right? Firstly, I think going to religious school and all this trivialized illustration we receive from OO is so dismissive because it didn't engage with the worst case scenario of indoctrination. With literally indoctrination at the worst case scenario means that you are forced to commit suicide in the name of jihad. It's literally you being forced to sacrifice your education to join ISIS. It's literally you having your whole life choices being like being a progressive individuals put under demonization of your whole life, right? So I mean that at the worst case scenario, this literally extend towards the permanent harm into someone's life. So I think like if parents are so important, exactly right. I think that when children sue their parents, for example, they also have an objective calculation because they literally suing their parents means like you're going to live far away and it's going to create permanent change, right? So I think when children sue their parents, this literally means that things are so bad and they need like another layer of protection. So I think that religious indoctrination is going to impact your life choices, interaction, identity, and relationship. The pressure of religious indoctrination is literally so multidimensional. Under both sides, there are going to be children there who are pressured by religion, but only under closing government you give them the right to protect themselves. We're so proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Government Whip. To close the whole debate, I would like to call the opposition whip. Floor is yours. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. So I think that CG needs to be kicked out of the debate, right? Because they spent quite a lot of time talking about the existence of domestic violence and emotional abuse. We say that number one, I think that we are also more than willing to punish things like domestic violence and emotional abuse. We already have a legal ground for that. But second of all, I think that literally all households are at risk with domestic and emotional abuse, right? So we don't see why it is only exclusive to indoctrination. So without the analysis of correlation, I don't think that this point stands. And therefore, we don't think that we're talking about parents who are pushing children to do suicide. We're actually just talking about parents who impose radical values to their children. And I think that CG does not engage to that at all. So I think that government bench needs to be kicked out of the debate because it seems like they don't understand how raising a children looks like. They also don't seem to get that the law does not simply work when someone is harmed, but it also accounts the means of the actions, right? Which is the evil intention that the parents have upon them. So they also try to compare the harm between indoctrination of values and killing people, for example, by car accident. We think this is a very off comparison. We say that car accident provides information for safety and there is no prejudices of moral questions before you get license. For example, you are tested and there are literally a lot of procedures to get that. So if you are driving while you're drunk, then it is you are able to be charged for negligence. But when it comes to religion, it is affiliated with the life and death of the parents. It intersects with the existence of heavens and hell. Perhaps for government, it's very easy to say that good parenting only needs parents to allow children to criticize their religion. But it's far more complex than that. For these people, criticizing and questioning God is a one-way ticket for hell, for example. So it's not necessarily the parents who are narcissistic enough to not accept any criticism. I think that it's merely a way for them to protect their family from rotting in hell, just like other families who are willing to protect their children. So with the principle of punishment that exists to create deterrent effect, I don't think that this punishment itself will work and will create such behavioral change and also deterrent effect, right? Because parents are more afraid to God than the law of the mortals, and they wouldn't ever realize if they are wrong in the end of the day. So any behavior changes that government wants to bring by putting these parents to jail and suing these parents simply unrealistic. So unless they explain the process of realization during the jail time, which they did not, I don't think that their point stands. No, thank you. Second of all, they also talk about the importance of freedom for children, right? 4 reasons why this argument cannot run. Number one, they neglect the characterization of children. We say that we don't just born in this world having all of our questions about the world answered, right? When children grow up, they look at their parents as a role model, so they would understand that what they're doing is wrong simply when their parents said so. I mean, this analogy also applies to all kind of parenting. So it is normal to always limiting children's rights to grant them the exchange of safety. If all of government's argument is only based on this logic, then I think that all parents are bad parents under their sides. But reason number two, I think that it is never clear what kind of parameter of harmful indoctrination they want to set as a bar of investigation. Why is this harmful? A, because they rely on children's subjectivity to plead the court under this uncertain parameter of indoctrination, and B, therefore it is unclear what is the goal of suing their parents. Do they want compensation in the form of money, or do they feel satisfied just putting their parents to jail, right? Without this victim analysis, we don't get any urgency at all, and we don't get any importance why then it will create such closure for the children, given all alternatives that CO provides, such as things like rehabilitation, government socialization, and religious-based counter-indoctrination, which we say is more realistic to change the behavior of parents when the approach to the parent is not positioning yourself as a children as an enemy to this parent, right? Therefore, the parents are likely to be more open to listen to a moderate teaching. We don't say that these parents are going to change in an instant, but we say that at the very least, they are not as resistant to these alternatives in our side of the house. Secondly, just because they are radical parents, it doesn't mean these parents are bad parents to their children, right? Because they still look at their children as their other half, and their religion also told them to be kind to your children. That means that these parents will look at their children as if these children also loves them. So if they want parents to slowly be open to de-radicalization, which I think that all teams agree, it's also important for government to have this kind of de-radicalization program. It can exactly only happen under our side when parents are not as resistant and isolationist as what will happen under government team. And lastly, even if parents don't change and they are still very radical, we say that it is even worse under government side of the house, because most likely these children who are able to think that religion indoctrination is wrong are those who are already have liberal or moderate exposure. They probably go to public school and they probably go to moderate masjid. So the impact is that these parents are more likely to be more isolationist because they know that the cost of allowing their children to go to moderate public schools are so big, so therefore they won't allow this to happen in the first place. But second layer, right? I think we have three reasons why we should win over opening opposition. I think that number one, OO did a good job in explaining why it's not within the parents' evil intention to do this kind of things. But they never explain how they will solve the radicalization problem when they also agree that radicalism is something that is bad and could potentially hurt the surroundings of the society. Second of all, they also never explain the harms of what will happen in the relations between parents and children if we allow this to happen, which will create more impact to the children and more harm to the children in itself. So I think that we are more upper hand rather than opening. We've told you that the degree of suppression under the government side is way more harmful, so we bring you cost more than just principle. And lastly, we have also stretched out the debate to a more communal scope harm. We say that this will exactly shift the discussions of radicalism to a more individual and family blaming. So instead of recognizing that this is the fault of the structure, this is also the fault of moderate Muslims who are, easily runs away from radical Muslim teachings by just saying that it's not part of Islam, it's not part of our teaching, and therefore we have nothing to do with this. In conclusion, I think that the cycle of radicalism will more likely happen under government side, which they have no response at all regarding this point, and therefore our point still stands for the more effective de-radicalization. Vote for CO. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Opposition Whip. With that being said, that marks the end of this debate. Sekali lagi makasih banyak untuk teman-teman yang sudah meluangkan waktu untuk membantu kita exit DIPO.